B. Page 17. Listen again to Activity A. Speaking skill. Changing the topic. A. Page 145.
I've had a very long day. I just came from my job.
That reminds me, I need to get your resume. My company is hiring and you would be perfect for the position.
Really? That's great. You make your job sound fun.
It is most of the time. We all get along well at work.
Oh, I wanted to ask you if you have time to help me with my homework.
Sure I can. We'll do it after class.
Anyway, I'd love to give you my resume. I've been looking for a new job.
I know. Speaking of which, my boss says she's interviewing people next week. Are you free in the morning?
I'll make sure I'm available if she calls me.
Hold that thought. I have to get to my next class. We'll talk about this later.
See you.
Unit 10. Child's Play. The Q Classroom. Page 199.
The Unit 10 question is athletic competition good for children? What do you think, Marcus?
Of course it is. Kids need to exercise. Childhood obesity is a growing problem, and exercise helps with that. It gets kids off the sofa and away from their computers and TVs.
That's true. But why athletic competition and not just exercise?
Because competition is motivating. Kids are more likely to play if they're trying to win at something.
What do you think, Felix? Do you agree? Is athletic competition good for children?
Not necessarily. I agree that some kids find it motivating, but for other kids, it's too much pressure. They're so focused on winning that it takes all the fun out of the sport. They do need exercise, but if they're under too much pressure, it's just adding stress to their life instead of helping them.
Sophie, what's your opinion about this? Is athletic competition good for children?
I think Felix and Marcus both made good points. But there's something else in favor of competition besides exercise. Kids in competitive sports learn sportsmanship. They learn how to work together toward a goal. And they learn self-discipline. I think there are a lot of benefits.
How about you, Una? Do you think athletic competition is good for children?
Mostly yes. Some adults get too extreme and push their kids too hard. But if you don't put too much pressure on the kids, I think it's good for them.
Speaking skill. Checking for understanding. A. Page 18.
Okay, guys, this project is huge, and it's going to be challenging. Here's what I need all of you to do. First of all, we all have to put in extra hours. That means long days for the next few weeks. It also means that we need to pull together and work extra hard as a team. That means all of us. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. It also means that you need to drop all your other projects for now. Please focus on this project. It is our top priority. Does everyone understand?
You mean stop working on every other project?
That's right. This account demands all our attention right now. Richard, please call the office in Tokyo and let them know that we need all the information they have on this client. And we need the information by Friday at the latest. Are you following me?
Yep, call Tokyo, get information on the client, tell them we need it by Friday.
Friday at the latest. Great. As for the rest of us, we'll be meeting again today at 3 o'clock. Before that, read over the project description. If you have any questions, please bring them to the meeting. Got it? Okay, let's get to work.
Unit assignment. Consider the ideas. 2. Page 147.
I was a housewife for most of my life, but after my divorce, I decided I wanted to travel and see the world. For 11 years, I've taught outside of the U.S., in Poland, Thailand, and Peru, where I've learned so much about other cultures. Sometimes I think my students have taught me more than I taught them. My son just had a baby, and I want to come back to the U.S. so that I can be closer to my family. I still want to travel, though, and I want to have a job where I can help students and inspire them to have some new experiences in other countries. I speak Spanish, Polish, and a little Thai.
I have taught history at a university for my entire career. I wanted a promotion, but it didn't happen, and I can see that my career is going nowhere. So now I am ready for a complete change. I have spent most of my summers traveling around the world, visiting historical sites and museums. I have studied Russian and French, but I don't speak either very fluently.
I just finished college, and I'm ready to start my career. I'm from India originally, so I would bring a multicultural element to your team. In addition, I love to travel. I went to Europe, Brazil, and Ecuador when I was in school, and I traveled all over Asia with my family when I was a child. I speak English and Hindi, and a little Spanish and French.
I took a gap year when I finished high school, and I think it really helped shape who I am. It broadened my world and made me aware of so many things. I'd like to help students have the same experience, encourage them to stretch themselves a little. I don't speak any other languages, but I would love to learn.
Listening 1. Training Chinese athletes. Listen for main ideas. Page 202.
Good morning. Welcome back to Topic Talk. I'm Ben Irwin, and my guest today is Jacinta Munoz, a writer currently working on a book about youth sports. She's just returned from several months in China, investigating what made the athletes on the Chinese Olympic team so good so quickly. Is there something American athletes could learn from their example? If you've competed in a sport, if you are the parent of an athlete, or if you are just interested in this topic, we'd love to take your calls later in the show. So, Jacinta, why did you decide to learn more about the Chinese training system?
A couple of reasons. First, I think we've all seen how the Chinese athletes have come out of nowhere in the last 20 years or so and have started to dominate in a number of sports. Just look at the 2008 Olympics, where their gymnasts won so many medals. But I have a personal interest as well. When I was younger, I was a pretty good gymnast myself, and I wanted to see how the Chinese training methods differed from the ones I used.
Pretty good? You're much too modest. You made the Olympic team in 1996, didn't you?
I did, but unfortunately, I was badly injured the month before the games began, so I never actually competed in them.
It was a knee injury, wasn't it?
Yes, I was coming off the balance beam, and I injured my knee. I just collapsed. The doctors couldn't fix it well enough to compete again, so I had to retire from gymnastics altogether.
That must have been so disappointing, to really be at the apex of your athletic career and have to retire.
It really was. I had trained for years with that one goal in mind, making the Olympic team. And I gave up a regular childhood, so it was a crushing blow at the time.
It seems to me that training for any sport at the highest level is pretty tough, but gymnastics is particularly brutal.
Well, I think at that level of competition in any sport, it's probably the same. Long hours, the intensity of the schedule, and many sacrifices. For example, I think I missed out on a lot of the fun activities most high school students participate in. But I think gymnastics is a little different because competitors are so young.
So gymnastics is probably similar around the world in that the athletes start very young. But in China, you found out athletes in many other sports are also starting their training at a young age, didn't you?
Yes. What's interesting about the Chinese system is it's a bit like the old Soviet system in that talented athletes are identified when they are small children, and they are usually sent to train at a special school provided by the government. As a result, they often don't see their parents for months or even years. Their counterparts in the United States, on the other hand, are often encouraged by their parents to stick with a sport. The parents are usually the ones making it happen by taking their kids to practice, paying a lot of money for special trainers, and so on.
Living away from home and family at such a young age must be very hard on the athletes. Why do they do it?
There are many benefits of this system. The Chinese children have all of their physical needs met, from housing to food and clothing to training costs to medical care. It's all paid for by the government. In the United States, young athletes and their families have to foot the bill. Sometimes, if they're very good, the athletes can get funding from other sources, such as companies or individuals that want to invest in their athletic careers. In general, though, it's up to the parents to pay for everything. But in China, there's no need for private investment. Government funding is integral to the whole system.
Why is training athletes so important to the government?
Susan Brownell, an anthropologist who has lived and studied in China off and on for several decades, has concluded that for the Chinese, sports have been a way to open up. Sports are the first areas in which the Chinese provided incentives or rewards for performance. They are proud of their athletes and want their athletes to represent the country on the world stage. They want their athletes to excel. Susan Brownell says that in the U.S., we raise our children to excel, to try to be number one, and we teach them to share. So in our sports training, athletes need to learn how to work together. Picture a child in the U.S. playing with a ball in the schoolyard. We often have to teach the child that it's important to share the ball. On the other hand, in China, they raise their children to share, and so they train them to excel. Humility is very important in Chinese culture. It's not good to stand out. But when athletes compete, they need to be better than others. They need self-confidence. So much of their training is focused on building self-confidence and on becoming faster, stronger, and better. As part of this process, individual provinces start selecting potential athletes from the elementary schools, and they train them to compete. Only about 80,000 of the hundreds of thousands of children selected will make it to the National Training Center, and that will take them years.
How are the children selected? Is it on the basis of their performance in the sport so far?
Not really. The recruiters are usually looking for body types. For example, children with small hips and flexibility are chosen for gymnastics and diving, whereas tall children are selected for basketball and volleyball. Some children are sent for training before they've ever even played the sport. But once they get there, they train for 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. As a result, they can get very good very fast.
Is it worth it?
Many athletes think so, since they get a chance to go to school, travel, and compete. Remember, often these children come from rural communities where they don't have as many options as those in larger cities. But the real beneficiary of the system may be China itself. In just 20 short years, China has gone from winning 5 medals in 1988 to 100 in 2008, the second highest total. It's really the beginning of a new era for Chinese sports.
Now we'll open the phones to take some of your calls. We've got James from Madison on the line. Hi, James. What's your question?
B. Page 18. Listen again to Activity A. Listen for details. Page 203. Listen again to listen for main ideas. Unit 8. Discovery. The Q Classroom. Page 151.
Here we are at Unit 8. The question is, how can chance discoveries affect our lives? Una, what do you think? Has a chance discovery ever affected your life?
Yes, I learned about this school by chance. I was at a cafe back home and I ran into an old acquaintance from high school. She told me about this school, so I went home and looked it up on the internet.
So if you hadn't run into your friend, you might not be in this class today.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad you made that discovery. So a chance discovery can affect where you go to school. How else can chance discoveries affect our lives? Sophie?
They can also affect your career. My brother happened to sit next to a man on an airplane who owned an import-export company. The man and my brother got along really well. They spent the whole flight talking and getting to know each other. Now, my brother works at the man's company.
Another lucky chance meeting. Felix, do you have any other examples of how a chance discovery can affect our lives? Maybe a discovery that doesn't involve meeting someone?
Well, I discovered the guitar by chance. I was in this shopping mall with my parents when I was a kid, and I wandered off into a music store. They were looking all over for me, and when they found me, I was playing with a guitar. Pretty soon, I was begging them to buy me one and get me lessons. The guitar has been a big part of my life ever since.
It seems like everybody has discovered some important things by chance. How would you answer the question, Marcus? How can chance discoveries affect our lives?
I think it's clear they can affect just about everything in your life. That's why it's important to keep learning and having new experiences, because the more you do, the more likely you are to have one of these good chance discoveries.
Unit 2, Appearances, the Q Classroom, page 23.
In Unit 2, we're going to talk about appearances. The unit question is, how does appearance affect our success? Sophie, what do you think?
Oh, in lots of ways. Our appearance influences what people think of us.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. The way you dress, for example. If you dress well, people will think you're more successful or more competent. They'll treat you more respectfully, and that will help you succeed.
Una, do you agree? Does dressing well help you be successful?
Yes, I agree. If you're careful about your appearance, people think you care about yourself.
Okay, what else? Marcus, how about the appearance of other things? For example, your desk or your bedroom. Does that affect your success?
Well, it could. How people look at you is important. If they look at you and think you're disorganized or not in control of your life, they'll be less interested in working with you. That could affect your success.
Anything else? Any other ways that appearance affects our success? Felix?
I agree with everyone else that appearances affect how other people react to you, but not everyone needs to be neat and well-dressed and good-looking to be successful. Your appearance also involves your style, and you can use that to help you fit into the group you want to be in. For instance, if I want to be a successful businessman, I would have a completely different kind of look than if I want to be a successful rock star.
Listening 1, The Power of Serendipity. Listen for main ideas. Page 155.
Nothing like starting off with a bang. In 1867, Alfred Nobel accidentally discovered dynamite after putting a popular but flammable salve on a cut finger. Call it serendipity. Rubber, indispensable today. Before Charles Goodyear mixed it with sulfur and accidentally dropped it on a hot stove, it was a smelly, unreliable mess. Again, serendipity. The list of serendipity stories is as long as the history of discovery.
Serendipity refers to looking for one thing and stumbling over something else that proves to be of greater value.
Radiologist Dr. Morton Myers accidentally figured out how stomach cancer metastasizes by watching where dye he injected for x-rays would spread and then collect. He's written Happy Accidents about serendipity in medicine.
What serendipity means is misadventure, an inadvertent observation that a sharp, open mind can exploit to find its true benefit.
In other words, having the brains to recognize an aha moment. We have Horace Walpole, an 18th century English writer and politician, to thank for the word serendipity. Walpole was inspired by a fairy tale called The Three Princes of Serendip. The princes traveled far and wide, turning every potential disaster into a triumph. Serendip is the old Persian name for what is now Sri Lanka, aka Ceylon, as in tea, which brings us to coffee.
So the story goes that Kaldi, who happened to be a goat herder, stood back and watched his goats eating coffee beans in Ethiopia. Wild coffee beans, and he saw that they really engaged in some strange behavior afterwards because of the caffeine.
Animals, according to food historian Andrew Smith, played an important role in early food serendipity. You like cheese? Think dead camel stomachs. Nomads filled them with milk and hung them like sacks from live camel saddles.
So you got the shaking motion of the camels, you got the rennet in the stomach, you got the milk in the stomach, and that really is the beginning of cheese.
My favorite serendipity story, for obvious reasons, Post-it notes. In 1968, a scientist at 3M made an adhesive that wasn't sticky enough. Eventually, somebody else at 3M thought maybe that adhesive would keep his bookmark from falling out of his hymnal at church. 1,000 Post-it products later, a world without them seems inconceivable. After the fact, serendipity seems so obvious. If there ever was a place literally in the serendipity business, the MIT Media Lab is it.
The whole idea is to bring together people with vastly different backgrounds: artists, scientists, engineers, designers, biologists. Have them interact in an open, play-like environment to experiment, not to be afraid of failure, and to build.
Which is how PhD student Adam Boulanger found himself working on software that allows Dan Elsey, who has cerebral palsy, who cannot move anything but his head, who can barely talk, not only to compose, but to perform symphonies. Can serendipity change the world?
I think only serendipity can change the world. I think serendipity is mandatory. It's not a luxury.
But it can be fun. During World War II, GE tried to make synthetic rubber. It failed. Nobody could figure out what to do with it until a marketing genius put it in a little plastic egg and sold it as a novelty toy.
It's Silly Putty time!
More than 300 million little eggs have been sold. Here's the best part. When Silly Putty turned 50 in the year 2000, it got the white glove treatment as it was solemnly installed in the Smithsonian Institution. Serendipity enshrined.
Listening skill. Listening for causes and effects. Page 204.
Many athletes are driven by the hope of winning medals at the Olympics. The athlete won 2 gold medals as a result of years of hard work. Due to bad weather, the baseball tournament was canceled.
The kids live far from home and practice very hard. Therefore, they only see their parents every few months. Some kids start playing some sports too young. The result is they often get injured before they even reach high school.
Listening 1. A perfect mess. Listen for main ideas. Page 27.
A Perfect Mess is a new book that explores the benefits of being messy. Our reviewer, Henry Rubens, finds reasons in the book to embrace his own habits of chaos.
Finally, In A Perfect Mess by Eric Abramson and David Friedman, I read the words I've been waiting for all my life. Neatness is not a virtue. It's okay to be a little disorganized. As someone who is frequently criticized for being messy, I now know I'm not such a bad person after all. I've been messy since I was old enough to dress myself. As a child, I had the usual arguments with my mother about cleaning my room, putting my clothes and books away, and making my bed. At college, I was even worse. Books, papers, and dirty dishes were everywhere. Oh, part of it was because I was lazy. But I also felt so stifled in a neat, too tidy room. I couldn't even think. I mean, I need a certain amount of chaos to feel comfortable. But it wasn't until I got my first job that I found out how deep the world's bias toward neatness and order is. I mean, I didn't know I would be expected to have a neat desk in order to do my job. But after reading A Perfect Mess, I see I have had it easy at work compared to other people. The book mentions a woman who worked at a post office in Australia. She was fined more than $2,000 at work. Why? Because she had 4 personal items on her desk. The post office only allowed her to have 3. Maybe it was an extra photo of her kids, and for that, she had to pay $2,000? The police chief in a Pennsylvania town had it even worse. He was actually fired from his job because of a messy desk. At least I've never lost a job. A perfect mess might help people like them, and me. The book begins with a description of the National Association of Professional Organizers, or NAPO, conference. NAPO is a professional organization I could never join. Anyway, NAPO has thousands of members. Thousands! These are people who have gone to graduate school in business or education or even law, and now devote their lives to helping the rest of us get organized. The authors, Eric Abramson and David Friedman, interviewed dozens of members of NAPO, and they point out that not once in any of the interviews does anyone answer the big question: what's wrong with being messy? In fact, throughout the rest of the book, the authors show us that being moderately messy can actually be good for us. A Perfect Mess takes the reader on a tour of the various messy parts of our lives, starting with those messy desks. The book argues that a messy desk can actually help you find things more easily because they're right out in the open, and it can help people make connections between ideas in new ways. Here's a great example. Leon Heppel was a researcher at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, in the 1950s. One day he was working at his desk. He stumbled upon letters written by 2 different scientists. The letters were in the piles of paper on his messy desk. If the 2 letters had been neatly put away, he would never have looked at them side by side. But he did, and he suddenly recognized an important connection between the 2 scientists' research. This connection eventually led to a winning discovery and a Nobel Prize. The book mentions he wasn't the only scientist like this. Albert Einstein was another great scientist who was known for having a very messy office. Next, the book looks at our messy homes. The authors say a messy home isn't so bad either. A very neat home can be impersonal and cold, but a home full of photos, personal items, and pieces of clothing strewn about shows others who we truly are. Many people believe that an untidy house sets a bad example for children. Abramson and Friedman reassure us it's not true. In fact, children may learn better in a messy space. The book gets support from research suggesting that a stimulating environment full of clutter, movement, and noise may actually help children remember information. And it turns out that keeping your house too clean can actually be bad for children's health. Dirt and germs help children build up protection against diseases. And the authors offer more evidence in favor of mess. It seems not only are messy people often more successful than neat people, they tend to be more creative and open-minded. Take, for example, the composer Johann Sebastian Bach. The authors describe his musical messiness. Apparently, each time he played a piece of music, he changed it. Bach would even take suggestions from the audience and work them into the music as he played. He sometimes went in so many different directions when he was playing that he upset the other musicians and the audience. I'm sure Bach would be surprised to see how inflexible people are today about his music. Each piece is played the same way, note for note, every time, all over the world. As the authors Eric Abramson and David Friedman look into our messy lives, they show us how a little chaos can be good for us. They tell us that mess may help us relax, be more creative, learn better, or even make an important scientific discovery. A Perfect Mess is a fascinating look at the unexpected benefits of mess. I'd recommend it to anyone, except possibly my kids.
Listen for details. Page 155. Listen again to listen for main ideas. A. Page 205. 1.
Our team won the tournament as a result of that goal.
2.
Amy trained too hard and didn't get enough sleep. Because of this, she didn't compete well on the day of the race.
3.
Due to the snow, our game had to be canceled.
4.
Olympic athletes in China receive government payment and don't have to support themselves financially. The result is that they can concentrate fully on their training.
5.
Coach Zhang has won several gold medals. Therefore, he is respected around the world.
6.
I can practice more often since we live closer to the gym.
Listen for details. Page 27. Listen again to listen for main ideas. Listening skill. Listening for signal words and phrases. A. Page 157.
Many people use a microwave oven every day. How many of you know that the microwave oven was the result of an accident? During World War II, scientists invented the magnetron, which is a kind of electronic tube that produces microwaves. We're all familiar with microwave ovens, but what is a microwave? Well, it's a very short electromagnetic wave. Anyway, in 1946, an engineer named Dr. Percy Spencer was standing close to a magnetron he was testing. He suddenly noticed something unusual. He felt something warm in his shirt pocket. He reached in and discovered that the candy bar in his pocket was a hot, chocolatey mess. In other words, the candy bar had melted. Dr. Spencer was so excited because he realized that microwaves could raise the internal temperature of food. In other words, microwaves were able to cook food from the inside out, and do it very quickly. Dr. Spencer saw the possibilities here. His next step was to build a metal box into which he fed microwave power that couldn't escape. He put various foods inside the metal box and tested cooking them. In time, he invented something that would revolutionize cooking, the ubiquitous microwave oven. By that, I mean that we see microwave ovens just about everywhere.
Listening to. Until It Hurts discusses youth sports obsession. Listen for main ideas. Page 207.
It's now 8:45 on Monday morning, which is the time we turn to sports writer Jim Butler for his take on the sporting world.
Maybe you heard the story last week. Yet another parent jumped onto the field at his kid's soccer game to yell at the referee. And just like too many other times, the yelling escalated, ending up with the father fighting with the referee. What a sad reflection on youth sports today and the role of adults in them. Which brings me to a book I read recently about our obsession with youth sports called Until It Hurts. The author, Mark Hyman, is a sports journalist who has written for Sports Illustrated and the New York Times. He's also a dad, a coach, and a former athlete. Mr. Hyman's book is about many things: how youth sports have changed over time and how they should change in the future. But it's also a personal story about what he's proud of and what he regrets about his decisions as a father and a youth sports coach. When we first began organizing youth sports, say, 150 years ago, the teams were guided by schools and educators. They were designed to be fun, teach skills, maybe build a little character. But sometime in the middle of the last century, educators bowed out and the parents took over, sometimes as coaches, but most often as very active spectators, and their ambitions often got the best of them. Parents wanted to see their kids do as well as possible at a sport, and so some big changes happened in the way children play sports. One change is that children started to play competitive sports at very young ages, when they're more vulnerable to certain kinds of injuries, like bone fractures. Mark Hyman says that kids now commonly start playing organized sports at 4 or 5 years old. Another change is that instead of playing a variety of different games, many children now concentrate on only one, which they play year-round. Again, injuries and burnout are more likely because they're doing the same thing over and over again, straining the same muscles. Mark Hyman knows more than most about this problem. In 2004, he wrote an article about how overuse of the pitching arm in baseball can result in an injury so crippling that you need a major surgery to repair it. In the article, he criticized the parents and coaches who failed to keep the young players safe. Then at age 18, Mr. Hyman's son Ben, a baseball player, found that he needed the very same surgery because of overuse of his pitching arm. This encouraged Mr. Hyman to think about his own role in his son's athletic career. He recalled an incident when Ben was 14. Ben complained that his shoulder was tired and sore, but Mark encouraged him to play again a few days later. Ultimately, the decision to play was Ben's. He played because he wanted to, and he enjoyed it. But Mr. Hyman still wondered if he had made the right decision in encouraging Ben to play. Mark Hyman suggests we take some fundamental steps to get youth sports back to where they used to be. We should listen to doctors, which will mean educating coaches about overuse injuries. We should also discourage kids from playing just one sport year-round. We should listen to children and help them decide if and when they want to play. And most of all, we need to restore perspective. Encourage parents to be the reasonable people they are off the field. In some communities, parents sign contracts about their behavior. In the contract, they agree to follow rules about fighting with one another and arguing with the referee. One such rule introduced Silent Sunday, a day when parents are banned from yelling or even talking at the game. If only that father at the game last week had signed such a contract, he might not have made such a fool of himself. And maybe, just maybe, the kids playing the game would have had more fun.
Listening skill. Identifying details. A. Page 28.
If you are one of the millions of people who just can't stay on top of your mess, don't worry. There's hope for you. Hi, and welcome to this workshop, Getting It Together. I'm Ella Oskey. I assume that you have come today because you feel like your life is too disorganized. If this is true, I have some suggestions that will help you organize yourself, both at home and in the workplace. Okay, let's get started. How many of you have spent hours searching for an important document or paper? How long did you look for your car keys before leaving the house to come here today? The first strategy I suggest is simple. Put everything in its place. In other words, put everything into the room or space it belongs in after you use it. If it doesn't have a place, make one. This is not a radical idea, folks. If you always put your keys in the same box next to the door every night, they will always be there in the morning. How many of you think you can do that? Great. Now, strategy number 2 is just as simple. Follow a filing and organization system. Every time you find a piece of paper, decide which of these 3 groups it belongs in: now, later, or never. If it is a now item, like a bill that needs to be paid today, deal with it immediately. If it is a later item, like a magazine you still want to read, put it in its place, like I talked about in Suggestion 1. If it's a never item, throw it away in the garbage immediately. So remember, now, later, or never. This filing system requires immediate action, though. This is the key point. Do something immediately with all papers and documents. Okay? How would you feel if you never had to sift through piles of papers again? Great. Now, on to the 3rd strategy. Do a little at a time. Instead of trying to change your whole life in one afternoon, work on it step by step. One day, organize a drawer. The next day, organize something else. If you try to do too much at once, you might feel frustrated. Making this change little by little will not only ensure that you get organized, but will also help you stay organized.
Listening 2. Against all odds, twin girls reunited. Listen for main ideas. Page 159.
Over the past 14 years, 45,000 Chinese children have been adopted by American families. So what are the odds that sisters separated at a very early age could actually find each other again half a world away? Some might call it a miracle, and they wouldn't be far off.
To see Renee Suri now, a happy 8-year-old who loves gymnastics, dancing, and horseback riding, you would never know she was once a sad and scared orphan in China.
She was crying so hard she was turned all red. She was very scared. She'd never seen anyone who looked like us.
Eileen and her husband David brought Renee back to their home in Florida to shower her with love, but they could tell her heart still ached.
Her sense of loss was just so big, and she was just so afraid to be alone. And at first I thought it was because in the orphanage she wasn't alone, but it seemed bigger than that.
Meanwhile, just outside Philadelphia, Annie Bernstein, almost 8, loves her new home, a world away from the orphanage in China.
This is our baby.
Her parents, Andrea and Craig, remember their daughter as a bright little girl.
She was very alert and bright. She was very aware. She was looking around and she was very aware of what was going on.
But Annie also seemed very deprived because they noticed she ate as if she'd never eat again.
She wouldn't want to leave the table. All the other kids seemed to eat and be satisfied, but all this food was around her and she wasn't stopping.
Andrea sought help from a support group on the internet, and one of the many who responded was a mom named Eileen.
Her answer was the best answer, which was to try a sharing plate in the middle of the table, and we both eat from the same plate. It was incredible. It was just solved it immediately.
These two moms, who lived 1,000 miles apart, noticed their daughters were from the same orphanage and decided to exchange pictures.
So when you opened up her email, do you remember that moment of what that was like when you saw her daughter's picture?
I was shocked.
The girls had the same hairline, same nose, same chin, same mouth. After exchanging more pictures, they just had to bring their 2-year-olds face to face.
It was
amazing.
Amazing, that's the word, yeah.
It was like a miracle.
What did you think?
I thought they were twins. Yeah.
Andrea didn't believe it, but she did notice the girls seemed to have a special connection.
We have pictures where Renee has her hand on Annie's stroller, and Annie would never let even us like touch the rim of her stroller, but she seemed like there was some kind of comfort level there.
But it would be 4 more years before Renee and Annie saw each other again, in July 2004 at a reunion of families who had adopted children from the same orphanage.
And
They
Renee
never
would-
left each other the whole time?
When Renee came back to the room, she would say things like, "Please don't tell my best friend at home, but Annie's my best friend."
Best friends. Sisters.
Since the reunion, the families have met 3 more times. We brought them together again for another visit.
Sometimes me and Annie trade places.
What? You play tricks on people?
Yeah. Sometimes I say I'm Annie, and sometimes Annie say I'm Renee.
Do you wish you guys lived closer together?
Yeah. I would like to live next door to play together, like, or have play dates like right after school.
4 months ago, the families tested their daughter's DNA.
They were really beginning to consider themselves to be sisters. I didn't want them to have false hopes that this was, a relationship that had a biological root, and it didn't.
The DNA results? The girls are almost certainly sisters, which means because they're the same age, Renee and Annie, in all probability, are fraternal twins.
Renee, she just started jumping up and down and squealing, "Yes, we're sisters, we're sisters, yay, we're sisters."
Finally, Eileen and Dave understood why their daughter Renee never liked to be alone.
She was never alone, not even in the womb. So for her, she needed Annie.
Since it's important to Annie, I think it's important to all of us.
Okay, you tell me why you love Renee.
Because we hardly ever fight and we agree on a lot of things.
And why do you love Annie?
Because she's my sister and I just love her.
My daughter has not asked me a single question about her birth family or searching for them since she's got Annie in her life.
Listen for details. Page 208. Listen again to listen for main ideas. Listening 2. The Changing Business Dress Code. Listen for main ideas. Page 31.
My guests today are Andrew Park from OPK Marketing and Hannah Nasser of Best Foot Forward Consulting. Thank you for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. We're going to talk about the changing business dress code. Andrew, let me start with you. For the last 10 or 20 years here in the United States, we've had a more relaxed attitude toward the clothing we wear at work, with some people working in jeans or even shorts. But is this relaxed attitude a thing of the past?
Well, it's not over, but I think it's fair to say it's on the way out and that more formal dress is definitely on the way in. Back in the 1990s, we really saw the trend of business casual catch on. Employees were allowed to ditch their suits and ties and formal skirts and blouses and wear more comfortable clothes in the office. For guys, it might be an open-necked shirt and cotton slacks. Women might wear a sweater with a long skirt. And even businesses that didn't go all the way to business casual started allowing employees to dress informally at least one day a week. Casual Fridays became the norm. I remember everyone looking forward to getting to wear what they wanted to on Fridays. Most workers thought it was great, and for a while, morale improved in many places. You know how it is with anything new. In the beginning, there's a lot of enthusiasm for an idea. Even employers liked the change. They thought of Casual Fridays as a kind of reward to give their employees at the end of a long work week. Dressing down on Friday would provide a bridge between the high-pressure work week and the weekend. They thought that if employees felt comfortable on Friday, it would increase productivity. But they found that this wasn't true. In fact, the opposite was true. Making employees more comfortable actually caused productivity to fall.
That's right. In fact, some supervisors noticed that on those casual Fridays, employees seemed to work less and relax a lot more. So, Hannah, do you think Casual Friday was a bad idea? Well, of course it varies from one workplace to the next. Certainly some employees really enjoy a more casual dress code, One survey we conducted showed workers like Casual Friday because they save money on clothes and they like not having to worry about what to wear. But in some companies, casual dress has had a negative effect. Maybe not so much on the work the employees do, but on the way customers and clients see them. Let's face it, clients don't always feel that casual clothes are appropriate in a business setting. They're looking for a sign that people are professional, like they know what they're doing. And investors might be more cautious around casually dressed professionals. I recently heard an anecdote about a CEO who had a meeting with a possible investor. The CEO turned up in a t-shirt and shorts. The investor had been very interested in the company's products, really cool video games, but decided against putting up any money. Who wants to give their money to someone who looks like they could be hanging out at the mall?
Okay, so business casual is on the way out because it's led to a fall in productivity and a lack of confidence from clients and investors.
Yeah, that's a part of it. Some companies clearly saw they needed a more formal look to keep investors and customers happy. But fashion trends always go in cycles. In the 50s and early 60s, the business uniform for men in the United States was a suit and tie. Working women wore a suit or a dress and jacket. The look was professional. Then in the 60s and 70s, young people gave up that look. They connected the suit and tie with older people and older ways of thinking. They wanted a more natural, back-to-basics kind of lifestyle. The children who grew up during the 60s and 70s became managers in the 80s and 90s. They were the ones who accepted casual dress in the workplace. When one generation dresses formally, the next wants to be casual, and so on. That's the way fashion works.
So are you saying that this is all just part of regular fashion cycles? That what we wear at work doesn't really matter that much?
Yes and no. Yes, there will always be cycles. And no, I think what we wear does matter. Because what we wear is not only about looks, it says something about who you are. For some people, a casual look is associated with a certain careless approach to other things.
I agree. To many people, a sloppy look indicates careless work, not just a style of dress. It's a matter of attitude. As Andrew said, the way we dress tells people who we are. What we're noticing is that nowadays many young professionals in their 20s or 30s want to look good and be taken seriously. They're the ones going back to suits and ties and formal skirts. They want a clean, professional look. The trend is toward a more grown-up form of dress.
You're so right. In many places, casual Fridays are starting to fade, and there's a move towards dress-up or formal Thursdays or Mondays. Formal as in employees showing up in tuxedos, dress slacks, fancy dresses, even wedding gowns. And this move is not coming just from the CEOs. It's coming from employees as well. Sometimes looking good really is feeling good.
Okay, that's all the time we have, so we'll leave it there. I'd like to thank my guests who always look professional no matter what day of the week it is. Thanks for listening.
Listen for details, page 160. Listen again to listen for main ideas. Vocabulary skill. Idioms. A. Page 210. 1.
First, I think we've all seen how the Chinese athletes have come out of nowhere in the last 20 years or so and have started to dominate in a number of sports.
2.
In the United States, young athletes and their families have to foot the bill. Sometimes, if they're very good, the athletes can get funding from other sources, such as companies or individuals that want to invest in their athletic careers.
3.
They are proud of their athletes and want their athletes to represent the country on the world stage.
4.
But sometime in the middle of the last century, educators bowed out and the parents took over, sometimes as coaches, but most often as very active spectators.
5.
And their ambitions often got the best of them.
Listen for details. Page 31. Listen again to listen for main ideas.